Well, good morning, everyone. And it is my hope that I'm coming through here and that we are recording. Yesterday, we operated on a void of course moon. You know what that is. It means that the moon is probably in the later degrees of a sign, and it fails to make any significant aspect or any aspect before it leaves that sign. So maybe not a great time to begin, but in any case, we did begin with the fourth series of Identify as Being. And I think Michael sent out to you the link to the program. There are usually different ways to view the program, and it was pretty much a lecture meditation, I guess I could call it that. Today we are resuming our treatise on cosmic fire. We are resuming our treatise on cosmic fire in depth. Of course, the whole idea of in depth is a very relative one. So let me just see. Yeah, I think we are both screen sharing and recording. And Michael, if anything is not correct, this would be the time to tell me.
It's all good right now.
Okay, thank you so much. So we have we have the book of all books as far as what the Tibetan has written. The Identify as Being series is different because we're trying to find a language which will help us enter states of consciousness that are not habitual to us. And I don't know, we use in that series, we use the mind less and we use the mind more. I don't know how else to describe it, but here we're sticking close to the Tibetan's words and trying to clarify. So I'd like to welcome you all, and that would involve Anne Veronica and Annette and Antoinette and Catherine and Chris Tronka and David Allen and Frederick Endres and Ishtar Presnell and Joe Walls. Oh, well, Joe is part of our team. And Leah Watford Lothar. See, the thing to do, keep your video off. Yeah, that would be good. And Leslie and Risto, welcome. And Stephen and Zenaidi. I guess that would pretty well, and Lori's here too. So some of you are up late or early, I realize that, and I'm trying to find the best time right now. And Brennan, welcome. I'm trying to find the best time right now to leave for Tuya and myself the Monday and Tuesday free for still other related things. We're switching back on the morning and evening schedule. So this time these special programs are on the morning schedule. And this evening there will be the Glamour webinar. That I think, Michael, that will not be on Zoom, as far as I know.
That is correct.
It
The,
goes,
the, the
yeah, go to me.
Dissipation of Glamour webinar will be in GoToWebinar.
Okay, so we just want to put that in for people at some point so they can see that link if you want to join us for the Dissipation of Glamour forever in your life. Right, well, that would be great. Okay, so welcome everybody. And, probably other people will join us as we go, but I just want to say welcome. Now, I want to bridge just a little bit because it's been a while. Preparing for the conference took a lot out of us. It was the first time we had a conference that was streamed, and there was a lot of preparation for it. And next year it will also be streamed. It was quite a successful streaming, I thought. And we know more what we're doing and maybe not have to prepare for weeks and weeks the way we did in this other case. So we're looking at the fundamentals of the secret doctrine, which are listed here in red, that okay, I see what it is. They are listed in a different way. Yeah. Well, anyway, there is a boundless immutable principle, and there is a law of periodicity. And if we look at what we're going to just review here a little bit, is that all souls are identical with the oversoul. So we're on page 7, basically, making haste slowly. What is the oversoul? Well, from a universal point of view, it is the unified consciousness of the universal logos. Think of that now. There is a great deity who is in demonstration through its vehicle a universe. It is a finite being, though in essence nothing is finite. In essence, we all are essence or being or substance, the ultimate substance, which is not material at all, and we are identical. All of us are identical in essence. So all souls are identical with the oversoul. Now, okay, in a way, the soul of our planetary logos is for us an oversoul. The soul of our solar logos is a still greater oversoul, and eventually we can go to the unfathomable cosmos itself as the universal oversoul. But it doesn't end there, beyond any universe is a still greater super universal deity, the consciousness of which is an ultimate oversoul. When we get into the absolute, we can't really say anything, but we do. So anyway, under this comes the statement by the Tibetan that the logos of a solar system is the macrocosm. Well, sometimes our planetary logos is considered for us a macrocosm, but certainly the solar logos of our solar system is for us a great macrocosm. But beyond that, there are cosmic logoi, supercosmic logoi, galactic logoi, it just goes on and on. and they are greater macrocosms. And man is a microcosm, is the microcosm. So I've made, a little bit of commentary here, and you can find all this on Makara. But at the same time, let's see, maybe Michael, will you be able to admit the people as they're coming in? So I won't get distracted.
Yes, I am admitting them.
Okay, very good. So the solar logos has a macrocosm too, might be considered a galactic logos. And there are even larger inclusive entities than our galaxy. But let's just say that for us, what we normally consider the macrocosm, in which we are a microcosm, a little world, and a big world, that's all it means, is the solar logos. Okay. So there are no real individual souls. We think there are. And there are many individual constituents in the one soul. And every emanation, which is a going forth of the essence of the universal logos, that's what an emanation is, a going forth of the essence in ever more constricted forms. So essentially, there's no difference between a tiny little human being and the solar logos and the galactic logos and all that, essentially the same, but the degree of constriction of the essence varies greatly. Then you get, below that, and lower emanations than that of a human being, even down to a tiny subatomic particle. The absolute same in essence as what a human being is or what a galaxy is. And individuality is a limitation of perception, or arises due to a limitation of perception. The self-perception of the universal logos becomes ever more bounded, ever more constricted, constrained, ever more contained, if those words make sense, okay? Now, the truth of the matter is, could we but realize it, as is expressed in rays and initiations, which Rule 5, wonderful rule, the macrocosmic whole is all there is. And we are no longer to use the thought, my soul and thine. Well, think of that for a minute. See, the dividing mind emphasizes form and artificial distinctions between this and that. But from the Hindu point of view, that is all there is. And even though we have to deal with all those distinctions, we're still lost, even no matter how bright or smart we are, unless we also contain the sense of the all-pervading essence. In this case, the all-pervading consciousness, but the all-pervading essence is the pervaded beingness of all perceptions, the all-pervading beingness of all perceptions. The soul, now, I'll try to signal when the Tibetan is speaking. I'm just making commentary on it, and you can find all this in Makara, but what we're doing here is amplifying what is said. Because in amplification come those tendrils of relationship, which eventually bind all things together in pure reason, a Buddhic faculty, a faculty of the intuition. So basically what we're doing, if we can think of it, we are reasoning our way to pure reason. We are reasoning our way, that's the mind, to pure reason, and that is the transcendental mind, one of the capacities of Mercury found on the Buddhic plane, reasoning our way to pure reason. I don't think there's any of us that is walking around in a state of perception we could call pure reason, but increasingly it will be so. I'm sorry, it's a morning frog. Then the Tibetan says, soul is an aspect of every form of life, from a logos to an atom to a subatomic particle. Who knows how minute it gets? If things get minute, it's a result of the will of the universal logos not to become still more minute. Does that make sense? Theoretically, divisibility could go on forever, and in the mind, theoretically, it does. You can always be closer and closer to no thing, closer and closer to nothing. But the universal logos, as it extends itself in emanation, calls a halt through an act of will. And that halt determines the scope of its finite universe. Every universe is finite. Essence is not finite. Essence is beyond universe. Now there's just some ideas here that are coming out of the abstract mind, which we're supposed to learn more and more about over the next 2,000 years in the sub-6 phase of the 5th root race. And these ideas are not normally floated in the mind, or they are not usually contained in the consciousness. But if we build the Antikarana properly, we will have, what can I call it, an elevator access in consciousness to such ideas as these. And by the way, I just want you to kind of, as we go along here, have your word program out or whatever you use and make notes of anything that interests you particularly, so that when we have our little discussion, you will not have forgotten what we have covered, because it's so easy to forget when we're dealing with these abstract issues. So the soul is an aspect of every form, every life form, from a logos to an atom, from a universe to a bubble in the koilan. Now, you know what a bubble in the koilan is. Sounds weird, but just check out that book by one of the early theosophical presidents, Janara Jidasa. And he kind of reports on Annie Besant and C.W. Leadbeater in their book Occult Chemistry, and he looks at the smallest particle on the cosmic physical plane, and he calls it a bubble in the koilon. And now we don't know if it's further divisible. Maybe it is on the cosmic astral plane. I don't know. But the implications are considerable. If it's further divisible, then, we just don't know what the smallest particle may be. But there are something like 14 million bubbles in the koilon in one physical, etheric, permanent atom. Something like 14 million of these tiny little structural bubbles that have been gathered together to make a simple atom, which is etheric, etheric permanent atom, and fewer bubbles making the progressively rising permanent atoms. Fewer in the astral permanent atom, fewer in the mental unit, fewer and fewer as we rise. Interesting. Okay. So, well, there's a lot, you can study this. I don't have time to stop at everything. I just want to say, about aspects and attributes. One is primary and one is secondary. There are 3 aspects correlated with the first 3 rays and 4 attributes correlated with the next 4 rays. So an aspect is inherent and fundamental. And when you combine aspects, you get attributes. For instance, at least the way I've worked that out for myself, combine ray 1 and 2, and you get the 4th ray. Combine ray 1 and 3, you get the 5th ray. Combine ray 2 and 3, you get the 6th ray. Combine all 3 rays, and you get the balancing and balanced 7th ray. So attributes are external or subsidiary to aspects. Aspects are structural, and attributes are modes of expression. The fundamental is the triangle, and then it breaks out into the square. So the first 3 are aspectual, and the next 4 are attributal. There is such a word. Maybe not. Now, this is all part of the hylozoistic theory. And basically it says that everything is alive. There's no such thing as that which is really dead and in the conventional sense of the word, inorganic. What you realize here is that we are kind of elaborating the fundamentals of the secret doctrine as they are found in the opening of the book, A Treatise on Cosmic Fire. And, going at the rate we're going, the year 2050 would be suitable for completion. But, okay, onward we move. There's a particular monad, I'm just isolating certain things, that is part of this. Remember, a monad has soul. It's not just that soul is something found on the higher mental plane. Soul is awareness, soul is consciousness. Everything has being or is being, everything has soul or consciousness. Just get these fundamentals in your mind, the philosophical fundamentals. May a particular monad work through a number of lower life forms? Yes, that's what we call group soul. So sometimes a monad, an essential consciousness on higher planes, will work through many collected instances of lower forms. A monad working through all human beings, for instance, the monad of the Lord of a kingdom of nature, or a human monad working through these collections which are part of our energy system. It's all a big pyramid with an all-seeing eye on top of the pyramid, as we find in the American dollar bill. And we find this, in various lodges. Things take place under the all-seeing eye. We are ultimately the all-seeing eye. Let's think about that for a minute. We, every one of us, ultimately is the all-seeing eye. And now I'm going to elaborate that statement by saying we are all the self-seeing eye, because the only thing we really can see is attenuated demonstrations through emanation of ourself. The only thing we can really see, really grasp, really register is attenuated demonstrations through emanation, because of emanation of ourself. Anything you see is yourself. Not from a practical point of view where you have to deal with the science of relations in the world of illusion, but from a philosophical point of view, you can never see anything except that which is the self. So we have, we live in this pyramidal universe. And there are fewer monads than there are atoms, at least forms of monads, and fewer men than animals of all kinds. There is the in-mineralization of the monad, the in-vegetalization of the monad, the in-zoonation of the monad as it rises through the lower kingdoms of nature. There is one monad that spawns a triad, which is its personality expression. Anyway, one monad. It can't really be separate, but it's apparently separate, is associated with many groupings below it. So make sure you shut your, and Veronica, turn your video off. It's nice to see you, but turn your video off. There you go. Okay. So there's the one and the many. And the many all take root in the one. And when I look at the many and the groupings below the monad, I say to myself, they are all the monad. Every one of them. The triad is the monad. The soul body on the higher mental plane is the monad. The personality is the monad. Every lunar vehicle in my personality is the monad. Every tiny atomic and subatomic constituent is the monad. It's all relating to one center of being. And that one center of being is simply an aspect of the entire being. So I can't help but mix some of the philosophy in this opening part of a treatise on cosmic fire. Now, the Tibetan again says the relationship between all souls and the oversoul, you know, whatever oversoul we're talking about, whether ultimate or penultimate or penultimate, you know, there's big big souls up there. The relationship between all souls and the oversoul constitutes the basis for the scientific belief in brotherhood. Now, this is really an important statement. Brotherhood is a fact in nature and not an ideal. Now, think of that. A fact in nature and not an ideal, not some great sentimental desirable. It's a fact. And during the last 2 decades of the age of Aquarius, not all human beings, but many human beings, functioning under decanate ruler Mercury and decanate ruler Venus, will factually understand brotherhood. Now, you know, we don't come from the earth. We don't come from the earth. We come first from sacred planets, of which both Mercury and Venus are examples. And when you look at that archetypal duad that is so important on the earth at this time, the Buddha and the Christ, you have an example. You have an example of the Buddha coming from Mercury as a monad and the Christ coming from Venus. Think about that for a minute, because I think that the majority of monads that find themselves here demonstrating in the Earth scheme are either Mercurian or Venusian, but of course other possibilities exist. Now let me take it down a notch. When you compare another 2 who work together all the time, Master Kuthumi and the Tibetan being his chief disciple, Kuthumi's chief disciple, you get the Tibetan as a monad coming from Mercury, and you get Master Kuthumi coming from Venus. So the second ray monad, essentially second ray monad, the Christ and Kuthumi are related to that. The third ray monad, the Buddha and the Master DK, I believe are related to that. And so much of what we're doing right now on this planet and in our own individual situations is trying to put together the second and the third ray. You know, on our planet, we have a third ray personality and a second ray soul, and those 2 rays don't work easily together. The Tibetan tells us there was this lady, she was a first ray soul, but she had a second ray astral body and a third ray physical body, and it caused her a lot of trouble. She couldn't, you know, kind of get them to work together in an easy manner. And thus it is on our planet. And that's the next step. Because our planet is not yet a sacred planet, we are monadically inactive. And the first ray monad of Earth, of the Earth logos, is not, the first ray monad of the Earth logos is occultly inactive, though can be detected through the red and the green, you know, complementary colors. We're told that nature, green, third ray, is red, first ray, in tooth and claw. It's a poetic line. And basically, we've got a pretty bloody planet under red, essentially coming from our first ray monad, which conditions everything, but it's not really active yet. So we've all been through a lot. We've all been through relative constraint and are making our way into fuller and fuller universal consciousness. Who knows how long it will take? If a solar system itself, according to the Brahmanic chronology, takes 311 trillion, 40 billion years. Now that's just a drop in the bucket. That's a little in terms of how long a universe may last, not just objectively, but subjectively. So, and this is only one of countless universes which ever have preceded any specific universe. Now think of that for a minute. It doesn't matter what universe you name. It can be a million universes ago in terms of time. It has always and ever been preceded by an infinitude of universes. That is, excuse me, one day I'll go to a hair cutter here as soon as it's safe. Meanwhile, I'll present my 12th century self. All right. Now we go on. And this is June 12th, and you know, we're making haste slowly, if I may say. Just keep your notes and we'll talk about it. So all souls are identical with the oversoul. We're talking about life units, monads. We're talking about jivas in the theosophical Hindu sense of the term. Yes, soul is consciousness, but we're also talking about units. But units are illusory. Now that's a big statement. Our consciousness reveals to us nothing but units of life. And how can we say they are illusory? Well, I will say they are actual, to be reckoned with, but essentially illusory. Because there's only one essence that obliterates unithood. And a unit is ultimately a point, and reality is pointless. I'll keep on coming back to that idea, that reality is pointless, and illusion is filled with a multitude of points, self-determined by a universal logos. Reality is filled with a multitude of points, reality in universe, determined by a multitude of units, a multitude of, this multitude is determined by the self-dividing nature of the universal logos. So brotherhood is a monadic relation, and when we're truly in brotherhood, sisterhood, whatever we want to call it, monads are units of spirit. The monads are, in a way, souls. You know, the ancient wisdom has a language which is used as we progress in it with a relative exactitude. We're dealing now with the science of relations. It's a great science, and I sometimes think it's the fundamental science that astrology expresses. We want to know how everything is related to everything else. Now, then you have to study the science of relations when you do that. But the science of relations is ultimately secondary to essential reality because, and I'll just say this, there are no real relations. Now, I know that, sounds preposterous, but in the science of being, there are no real relations. There are only apparent, actual, to be dealt with in universe relations due to the imposition of limiting perception on the one perceiver. In other words, the one perceiver limits the way it sees things, the way it sees itself. And this produces all the many points, all the many units, all the many appearances of distinction. That's what produces it. It's an internal decision that you and I, as being one being, have made long ago, every time and forever. So, there's the language of the science of relations, at which we are certainly not adept. When you start reading Master D.K., who's on, I think, the third subray of the second ray, and you get an expert in describing for us as much as we can comprehend of the science of relations. But beyond that, and hinted at by Master D.K., is the science of non-relations, reducing all relationships to non-relations. Now, not everybody has an appetite for that, because basically you are entering the realm of isness, which obliterates apparent relationships. But you've got to study the science of relations, otherwise you cannot manage illusion, which is periodically self-chosen forever. The management of illusion, periodically self-chosen forever. Sometimes I repeat things because it's an unusual form of words, and we've got to let things sink in. So we're learning two languages here. We're learning the language of the science of relations and the obliterative language of the science of non-relations. Now, maybe you've noticed when you've studied occultism that one of the chief methods of setting up what's called an occult blind, which you cannot penetrate unless you can penetrate it, is to use the same term for different things or different terms for the same thing. It confuses you, and unless you know, you can't penetrate to the truth. Master Moria once deplored the fact that so many terms were used for the same thing, but it's good for occult blinding. And, Master D.K., for instance, is talking to many types of souls. So basically, he has to reveal and conceal at the same time. Now think about that. Master, in presenting us the wisdom, has to reveal to those who have eyes to see or ears to hear, and conceal at the same time from those who must not get the truth too quickly. They're not ready for it. So be on the lookout when you read Master D.K. Like the word soul. Wow, how confusing, huh? You've got to be able to penetrate into that real meaning. Is he talking about consciousness? Is he talking about the causal body, egoic lotus on the higher mental plane? Is he talking about the solar angel? is he talking about the projection of a portion of the solar angel onto the higher mental plane, which we call the angel of the presence? What's he talking about? And that's why people get very confused when they see that word soul and they don't know the context. They cannot intuit the context. Well, we're going to get better and better at that. So all souls are identical with the oversoul. All units of being consciousness are identical with the great unit, the great universal unit of being consciousness. That's another way to say it. A lot of people are going to approach brotherhood, sisterhood. Well, you know, humanity is a masculine kingdom, the devas are a feminine kingdom, and thus the terminology takes on a certain coloring. They approach brotherhood in an emotional, idealistic way. Great, okay, that's better than nothing. But when triadal and monadic consciousness, which is really impersonal, becomes established as realities in individuals and groups, brotherhood will be recognized as factual, directly through experience and brotherhood. It doesn't make any difference if you like somebody or you don't like somebody. That would be sentiment, liking and disliking. He helps you get rid of that in the beginning of Rule 10, where he says the very first thing to eliminate is sentiment, this glamour of liking and disliking. So you can hate and be repelled by some form of life, and there's some awful, icky, awful forms which are not plan related whatsoever. But where do they come from, and what are they essentially? You have to remind yourself of that, and it's not a pleasant thing to do. You know, in the world of relativity, you can despise a certain politician or church person, or, you know, I mean, someone that's really leading everybody astray, and yet you have to see the essence behind and within that objectionable form. That's why DK sometimes talks about evil personalities, but not evil souls or evil beings. There's no such thing as evil beingness. Evil is illusory and the product of constrained perception. He deals with it. That there's somewhere in Cosmic Fire, there's a footnote about Blavatsky's friend, Dr. Anna Kingsford, who was a pretty high-class medium, and she, whatever was working through her, was discussing the problem of evil and how difficult it was to deal with. So anyway, we're going to be entering the scientific age of brotherhood. Now remember, Venus is so much connected with the soul. So it's going to be the age when we know we are all souls, and we know we are the one soul. And not everybody, no, because it's just not reasonable to expect it. Some people are not even going to be on the path until the next round in this particular chain. But our elder brother, so to speak, or sister, Venus, the solar angel, so to speak, to our solar angel of Earth, is going to come into quite a lot of prominence for advancing people, disciples and initiates. And we've all been, you know, retarded to a great extent, or held back, or held ourselves back. But we will move forward. Liberty, Aquarius, equality, Libra, fraternity, Gemini. So we've got Venus equality and fraternity. So Venus and fraternity mix, and also equality. Are you equal to everybody? Well, there's my E, it doesn't want to print. Yes, you are the monadic equal in essence to everybody. Are you the demonstrative equal to everybody? No. In the world of demonstration and manifestation comes the inequality demonstrated by the science of relations. In the science of non-relations, everyone is the equal of everyone else, and everything is the equal of everything else. And all things have but one size, we'll talk about that, and one essence. So maybe we feel it on the astral plane at first, after the second initiation. Venus starts becoming quite prominent at the second initiation. Well, it's a symbol of the soul. So in the whole initiatory process, Venus is active. But emotionally and how we feel about others, it's the second initiation when Mars is in process of being defeated. Mars and Pluto go down, Venus, Jupiter, and Neptune go up. And the buddhi or love starts coming into the astral body. When I look at Venus, I think it's got the same rays as its prototype, the star Sirius. I think it's a second ray monad like Sirius is. I think it's a fifth ray soul like Sirius is. It may have the second ray personality also, like Sirius can be hypothesized to have. The fourth ray has to be in there as well, maybe in the mind nature. Well, that's maybe as far as I can go. So anyway, if we follow the laws of the soul, and you know where to find them, in Esoteric Psychology Volume 2, and we are successful in following them, we will be led towards brotherhood, sisterhood. We will be led there. And the law of magnetic impulse, which allows you to see everybody as souls and everything in soul, is the, again, second law of the soul. The number 2 is coming up. And Venus is active again in the law of group progress under Capricorn, because Venus is the hierarchical ruler of Capricorn. So what we can handle so far, maybe, is the archetype of the coming brotherhood, sisterhood, our relation with the solar angel. And when we succeed, we begin to have brotherly, sisterly, sibling relations with our fellow human beings. Venus is so important. DK said, look for it in the horoscope of disciples, and also look for certain of the major stars like Sirius and maybe some stars in the Big Dipper. Look for their positions, because the stars are not without effect. It's true that under Sirius a dog might bite you. It's also true that the great meaning of the loyalty to the Christ can demonstrate. Maybe going on just a little more here. Well, it's just something we've got to, we may never get out of the introduction, but it's part of what I call spherical study. not just linear study. It's every perception studied has relationship to every other perception. So everything is related to everything else, and as my old friend Annie Mueller used to say, and reciprocally. Everything is related to everything else and reciprocally. So when we study, we're undertaking a very big study here, the law of correspondences will help us with the details of the science of relations. It is a special, more detailed case of the law of analogy. And what does he say? The law of correspondences will explain the detail of this relationship, that every soul is related to the oversoul. The law of correspondences, or of analogy, but usually analogy is a little bit more vague, is the interpretive law of the system and explains man, God to man. And of course, God knows how to use it. And man doesn't yet know how to use it. I like analogy a lot. I took a test on analogy in which I did very well, but I didn't get a perfect score because I didn't know that vodka was made out of potatoes. That one item of information escaped me. Oh, golly. So that's about an hour's worth of discussion. And I'm just not going to go too far with this. If I ever kind of talk about it by myself, I'll make sure that you get the, you get the program. Maybe we'll start with the law of correspondences, and we'll get into some different rays of the kingdoms, and we'll, deal with the fundamentals, because I think we would be surprised. We're almost at the end, but the next time we'll be at the end of this first page of analysis, which has been, 45 pages or whatever. We have maybe skipped over the stanzas of Zian, because I figured we'd be in a better position to deal with them after we had in our own languages some understanding of the facts of the cosmos, and then the arcane language of the stanzas of Zian could be brought into relation with factuality. So I'm going to say that we're going to be ending here, Cosmic Fire number 15 and group webinar number 11, because I did 4 on my own without the presence of listeners or participants, and group webinar number 12. And the next time we do this is going to be the 19th of June. And as far as I know, it will be an evening presentation, so the people in the United States will not be asleep. And we're still very much in the early pages and stages. I think, can you see, Michael, are we on page 7 still, perhaps? If you know that or can find that, that'd be great. And then we'll be heading into page 35. We'll jump over the stanzas of Zian because they won't make as much sense to us at first as they will later when we have in our own language the fundamentals. It's a great cosmos we live in. It's a great cosmos we are. Now think about that. It's a little beyond, but okay. We live in it and we are it. And we live in ourselves. And you can't escape yourself. You can't escape the self. You cannot escape. You cannot escape being yourself, the one self. So we'll pick it up from there, and I'm just going to take a quick look at this cosmic fire thing, and I'm going to go to page 7, and you don't see it, but yeah, it's still page 7. Well, or maybe page 8, I don't know, somewhere in there. Page 7, page 8. I just can't see. Yeah, it looks like page 7 and page 8 is maybe one of those blank pages it's skipped over. Okay. Okay, now friends, a few more of us have gathered. The Tibetan's language for the science of relations is comprehensible once you get used to it, and we can begin to get used to it. As far as this language that is used with regard to the science of non-relations, which is equivalent to the science of being, well, everybody's on their own, you know. We'll see what you can do with it and evolve your own language that makes sense to you. So now it's time for your comments, your questions, or anything that occurred to you in this discussion, which was a discussion on what DK has written and a discussion on thoughts which arose from what DK has written here. Always be as sure as you can be of the fundamentals, because it will help you later. When we try to, you know, I say, well, it's a really good thing to have read Initiation, Human and Solar when it comes to trying to understand the other books, because with that foundation and the foundation of Letters on Occult Meditation, you can go far. I wouldn't want to get into Cosmic Fire without having read those 2 books. Okay. Is there anybody that, and I'm going to ask Michael to help me here.
Yes, and while people are pondering what to ask, I have something to share from The Light of the Soul. Number 8, hate is aversion for any object of the senses. This sutra is the reverse of the preceding one. The true yogi neither feels aversion or desire. He is balanced between these pairs of opposites. Hate causes separation, whereas love reveals the unity underlying all forms. Hate is the result of concentration upon form and of a forgetfulness of that which every form, in more or less degree, reveals. Hate is the feeling of repulsion and leads to a withdrawal of the man from the object hated. Hate is the reverse of brotherhood, and therefore is the breaking of one of the basic laws of the solar system. Hate negates unity, causes barriers to be built, and produces those causes which lead to crystallization, destruction, and death. It is energy used to repudiate instead of to synthesize, and therefore runs counter to the law of evolution.
Excellent. And so Very good. And, you know, love is interesting because, you know, we have a pair of opposites. We can say hate and love are opposites, but we can also say that hate and attachment, or the desire to be attached, are opposites, with love balancing them. Love has enough detaching quality to prevent adherence and engulfing in the form. So, you know, love is balanced, whereas this ardent desire to have something, you know, takes us too close to that something, and hate, of course, drives it away. You know, Michael, and everybody, what you're talking about would be further amplified and brought even more into the light by a study in Esoteric Psychology, Volume 2, of the fourth law of the soul. And, you know, some of you know those laws, or at least are familiar, and that's the law of repulse, which sounds rather hateful. But then DK says it's an aspect of the law of love. So, you know, we have to ponder on that, because unless we hold certain things at an objective distance and then contemplate, we cannot have real love. We can only have desire, which binds us to the thing desired, where love is not a binding force, a handicapping force, an imprisoning, fettering force. No, love is a liberating force, and it does not compromise or bind the life, but desire does, just as much as hatred. Matter of fact, hate is like desire in reverse. So those three, hate, attaching desire, and love, have to be considered together.
One of the things that really struck me in this was the reverse of hate being brotherhood. And so often we relate hate and love as those opposites, but that is a unique statement.
Well, you see, brotherhood is monadic, isn't it?
Yes.
This is what we've been learning. And if it's monadic, it means you're in a state of identification. And you cannot hate anything that is not really different, appearing as different from your essential self. I mean, we hate this and we hate that. But what if there's no this and that? What if there's only this all-pervading beingness, which makes all of us brothers, sisters? It makes all of us essentially related, and not just harmoniously related. That's good too, but essential identicality is beyond normal relationship. So obviously we will have had to, by the time we reach the last decanate of Aquarius, we will have had to overcome a lot of Mars, which is the great dividing force. It's like it rules knives and swords and scythes and everything that cuts things into pieces. You know, in politics, we have here in America, I'm here in Finland, but you know, in my mind, I still think like an American. We have someone in power that has Mars on the ascendant, dividing, the great divider, dividing one from another. But Venus is the uniter and the ruler of the final decanate, when brotherhood will at last, what we call brotherhood, will at last flourish. Well, okay, now we've given you enough time to think if there's anything you would like to discuss, either based on what we've been dealing with, or maybe just on occultism in general, because, you know, everything leads to everything else, and there's no point of discussion which cannot reach any subject if the right path is chosen. So would anybody like to either write or say something? Now, Michael, let's see,
They
would
can
go,
write things into the chat box,
yeah,
or if you click on the participants button, there is available a raise hand function at the bottom of that box.
okay. And Michael, will this make the transcription disappear? Because I've noticed that in chat, you know, when we do the chat shows up, but then all the words that may have been spoken and written in English seem to disappear. Do you
That's
know
a,
about that?
that's
Yes?
a separate function. The transcription is separate. It just takes much longer for the transcription to be done.
Okay, well, I approach that subject with hope. Okay. All right. Is there anybody that would like to say something, ask something, or, and the field can be wide open. It doesn't just have to be what we have discussed. It's nice when it is on the subject, but it can be anything in the field of occultism, which means anything. Is there anybody? I'll tell you what, don't be daunted. You know, when you read Cosmic Fire, first of all, we know it's a book for initiates. So whatever we try to do, we're just scratching the surface. So that's everybody, you know. He released it to the public, and yet it's a book for initiates. Its secrets are securely protected. But everybody else tries to get an anchor in the book. So don't feel shy, don't feel daunted. Just get in there if you've got a question. So David has his hand is raised, right, Michael?
David, you're unmuted.
Hello, thank you. Can you hear me?
Speak up a little louder, or raise the volume on your computer a bit.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I'm doing my best, David.
Go ahead.
All right. This is a very general question. I'm still taking my first steps on this particular path and with these studies. And I must say I was blown away for different reasons by your presentation this morning. There's a lot here that I haven't heard before. However, something is niggling with me, and it's all this question around hate.
Yeah.
And I want to ask this, and I'm asking for guidance more than anything else. Do we not need, in our practical day-to-day lives, functioning in the world, some measure of hate? And I ask this because we see a lot of wrongdoing in the world. And I suspect that we may need some emotional drive to confront the wrongdoing, and eventually at some long time in the future to seal the door where evil dwells. That takes action. It takes focus, it takes dedication, but it also takes a very clear definition of where you stand in relation to events that are going on.
Yes.
Am I hopelessly confused here?
I think not. I think not. I think it's
Okay.
what we call things. You need, we all need purposeful repulsion without consuming us emotionally regarding that which must be repulsed. So, I don't know if you've gotten yet, David, into the law of repulse, the fourth law of the soul.
No, I haven't.
Okay, well, that would be, read the laws of the soul, esoteric psychology 2, and if you just want to plunge in, go to the fourth law, which is under the first ray, and produces a first ray scattering effect, casting far afield those things which are undesirable and detaching ourselves from them. We need to be motivated by the purpose to see the will to good manifest, but we must not be consumed in a solar plexus sense by this any kind of virulence or an objection, a rejection which obsesses us and becomes an emotional problem in its own right. So I'll tell a little story. So I don't watch much television, and I don't go to many movies, but occasionally I see something. And long ago, there was a story about people in the Australian army who had been captured by the Japanese. And the idea was that the captured soldier was speaking disrespectfully to his Japanese captor, lightheartedly and without gravitas. And basically he was in the situation where he just said, I have nothing to lose. And he did this. And the Japanese commandant did what? Did he go kill him, slap him? No, he released him. Why was that? It was because under his code of samurai honor, he found himself getting angry at the man's words. And the code would not tolerate anger or hatred. And so he did the very opposite of what you might expect as part of his own self-discipline. He had a purpose, and the purpose may have ended in the death of the captive. But when the captive angered him, he had to release him. And this is the idea of not being consumed by any solar plexus reaction to a necessary rejection. We do have to reject a lot, and then later, after we reject it, we reclaim it. It's very interesting. When you read it, you'll see that the law of repulse, a very scorpionic kind of law, is subject to an aspect of the law of love. So putting those two things together, love and hate, which are still related, even though we've said hate is the opposite of brotherhood, it doesn't mean it's not related to something else. You'll see that repulsion, ultimately, initial repulsion may be an act of love. But if we allow ourselves to get consumed by any solar plexus reaction, we're functioning below the diaphragm, where disciples must not allow themselves to function in a way that prevents their recognition of it and their escape from it, because that's the old way. We have to lift the solar plexus to the heart, which does not mean we're not capable of disciplining others and disciplining ourselves, but without consuming emotion, which clouds the mind, raises glamour, and prevents a clear sight of reality. So I would say that purposeful repulsion is absolutely necessary, but being consumed by hate or indulging in it is dangerous. Now, you may remember I don't know if you saw the Star Wars series. The chronology of it was difficult because they were talking about before and behind and in the future. But the evil emperor, he tried to induce hate in Luke Skywalker. And Luke began to hate. And the evil emperor said, good, because he wanted hate to characterize the psyche of that young man. But then he pulled back and saw what was happening to him, and he refused to hate or be consumed by hate. You may have to kill somebody, but you do it with detachment. That's the warrior's code. And you do it swiftly and with a minimum of pain. You don't get involved. My wife is very good at this. I mean, she knows these things, being on the first ray. You don't get involved with what's called bloodlust, the desire, the unnatural desire to see blood spilled, almost being consumed by it as a pleasure. So I hope I've made clear the distinction between what grabs the solar plexus as hate and what is coming from a higher part of ourselves, purposeful rejection.
Thank you, Michael. Can I add one more thing?
Yeah, go ahead, David.
You spoke about movies. You don't watch a lot of movies. Now, I do. I find movies very powerful vehicles for storytelling, and I'm reminded by this discussion of the movie that came out recently, The Two Popes. And the movie was talking about our current Pope Francis, who I think came from Argentina.
Yes.
And the so-called Nazi Pope, Ratzinger, who was Pope under the Nazis. And what was very interesting about this movie, which was never fleshed out in full, and I feel it was very disappointing that it didn't, was how both popes, who fought and disagreed with each other at a very deep level, they both had to make their own pact with evil for the sake of a higher purpose. And in both cases, it was to preserve the clergy and the priesthood in their respective countries. So there's also instances where we may have to put aside our, what shall we say, moral vanity, and actually make a deal with evil for something of a much higher good.
Well, let's see. You know, I would say on a case-by-case basis, we could study these things. The old adage is you don't argue with the devil. The Christ treated it in the right way through a clear-cut statements during the temptations in the desert. But, those are complex situations you're talking about, and they have to be studied regarding alternatives. Now, actually, David, if I have it correct, the Pope during the Nazi period was Pope Pius XII, but Ratzinger maybe was in the clergy, but not yet Pope, right? He was not Pope.
Yes.
Not during the Nazi period, he wasn't Pope, but
Yes.
he became Pope, and I don't know what his relationship to Germany was. Probably he was still in the church in some way. The church had a very tough time, and some people really sold out, and they sold their values. Maybe Pius the 12th, was it the 12th, was one of those. He's much criticized for his relationship with the Nazis, but then along comes John the 23rd and Pope Francis, and they're of a completely different humanistic turn. So here's the question. What is the deal with the devil? Which means a compromise to exalt the personality over the soul, because the devil is nothing but the 666. It's just Mars. mars as it rules every phase of the personality and the personality itself. So I would say, rather than make a blanket statement, I myself would say, let us study every instance of this in detail so we could see how the values came down. Sometimes the preservation of the clergy as it was may not have been a good thing. But when I was in Germany a while ago visiting a friend, and I stayed in the Dietrich Bonhoeffer Hotel. And, now there was a person who was a huge light in this terrible situation. He didn't make a deal with the devil, and he was appropriately persecuted. They will persecute you for my sake, says the Christ. So which approach is right? And I won't make a blanket statement except to say everything has to be studied. But Bonhoeffer almost escaped all that, but somehow he kept on his sacrificial path. And what Moria said about it all was, when have you ever become less through sacrifice? That just branded itself in my consciousness. So I would say it's a tough question that needs to be very carefully examined case by case. But thanks for bringing up that film. I haven't seen it, but I'd be interested.
Michael, can I add something?
Oh, sure, of course, Tuya.
Yeah, because this is so the most fundamental questions about what is evil. In one sense, when we think about where we are living, this is the plane of shadows, or this is the plane of darkness, because we are living on the cosmic physical plane. And in one sense, whomever we meet here is a part of that evil. So in one sense, when we just think about things on the physical plane, they are somehow always dealing with this evil. And then in philosophical way, there is no evil. We can translate evil that it is a tester for us, that's why there is so-called evil, because the higher one needs to test us. Are we more skillful now than before? So these when we deal with humans, and all human beings are having some kind of line, now we know that what the Nazi was representing, there was coming the touch from cosmic evil. So that is giving us this understanding that the so-called evil is not stopping for a long time. So, but how we have the skills, there is the saying also in Bible which says that no good is growing out of evil. That whatever we do, we have to do with the good motives or pure motives, and the motive for whole is always that what is like the highest principle to against which to compare. So this question, good, evil, is so big that this is the reason of all existence, at least for us who are living on earth. And that's why it's not black and white question, because it is the whole issue why we are here. We are uplifting this evil by living here and making all the time from that perspective better decisions.
Yeah, that's good, Tuya. You see, if you go into Cosmic Fire, and somehow, I can't tell you where it is, maybe someone can find it, in one of the footnotes, that transmission through Dr. Anna Kingsford, evil is equated with limitation. And in Buddhism, evil is equated with ignorance, the greatest sin. It is actual but not real. And we're told resist not evil, and yet at the same time, Master Moria says, every true disciple or initiate has an instantaneous repulsion to evil. It's just built into them that they repel evil. So, and very, is it a question sometimes of turning evil into good? Well, we're told that the first being in our local system that can do that is Sanat Kumara. In other words, this is very interesting. Cosmic evil was not in the plan of our planetary logos, and you kind of wonder, can he handle it? Though Sanat Kumara has a great skill in that regard. But cosmic evil is in the plan of the solar logos, and he handles it in such a way as to bring good out of the apparent evil. It's way beyond us to be able to do that. So obviously, this question of the deal with the devil, you know, we oftentimes hear of people who sell their souls to the devil for great fame, and or maybe Dr. Faustus did this, and in the end he was torn apart by the demons and all of that in a most horrible way. I would rather think that for disciples, as much pain as it may cause, we've got to come down on the side of good always. But let's go to Les Miserables. Let's go to Jean Valjean. And he is taking refuge with a priest. And the police, the French police, are chasing him. And he steals a candlestick made of silver, whatever. And he sneaks away, but the police catch him. And they bring him back to the priest, who says, and they say, here, this miscreant stole your candlestick. And the priest says, oh, my son, why didn't you take the other one that I gave you as well? Why did you take only one? A lie? Uh-huh. And then, this is the one that really gets me. There's a sister, a nun, who never lied in her life. And she sees the priest lie for the sake of for the sake of the good in this particular instance. And she absolutely has to swallow her tendency to be proud of the fact that she never lies, so that the good can emerge. Well, look at, you know, you don't give atomic secrets to the enemy who's going to blow you up, even if you have to lie to conceal it. Or at least what the masters do is they just hold their tongue. They don't exactly lie, but they do not reveal. They find the way not to reveal. They're very cagey, and they do not reveal. So look, it's interesting that this kind of question comes up because there is so much what we might call evil in the world at this time, and it's all rising to the surface, as you would expect, because it's Pluto preceding the reappearance of the Christ. Pluto and Vulcan, two first-rate planets, become very active before the Christ reappears. And Pluto drags everything to the surface. Now, for instance, if I was to, let's see if I can just find it. And I'd go to page 70 here. I hope you can see what I'm doing. I'm not sure. Here it is.
You're not sharing that application.
Okay, well, I'm going to try to share this. Thanks, Michael, for alerting me. Here it is. Now you see it in red.
Yes.
At the first initiation, or basically before it, the disciple has to contend with the crystallizing and destroying forces of Vulcan and Pluto. The influence of Vulcan reaches to the very depths of his nature, and Pluto drags to the surface and destroys all that hinders in the lower regions. Page 70. Now, we have officials in power. One of them has lied 19,000 times plus since he became president, either lied or misled. We are faced with what we would conventionally call evil, and it must be fought. And it cannot be accepted, and there's no deal with the devil in that particular case. It's got to be fought. And so resist not evil does not apply there. In the resistance is the hope. And that's why the hierarchy took sides with America, with England, with the UK, with Russia in the Great War from 1914, but basically the second phase, 1939 to 1945, Second World War. Hierarchy took sides and was roundly criticized by the sentimentalists who said, oh, it can't be hierarchy because they're taking sides. Well, they saw greater values, just like you were mentioning, David, in choosing some things that may have looked evil in order to preserve something that was better or good. Now, in this particular case, I think, it's just so obvious in this war situation. You just resist evil with everything you've got, but you use occult methods to do it. And that's what the hierarchy did, though staying within the law. And it's all part of the Christ reappearing after the house cleaning is occurring under Pluto. Pluto is the healer
Michael.
and the house cleaner. Yeah, Tuya, is that you again? Yes?
Yes, just a little addition about the solar angels. So solar angels, while they was descending, they had to take a form of evil. It's the Makara mystery, because they, in order to redeem, they have to become, or at least pretend to be us in the form of evil.
And there was the idea that evil is limitation. In other words,
Right.
the solar angels are beautiful. They have great radiance, and they had to be born or had to take a presence in these huge, crude animal men, which for them is like going into hell. So, but that was a great sacrifice, wasn't it? And one day, 80 to 85% of human beings will be solar angels. And they will, well, let's see what sacrifice will be theirs, because the method of individualization in the next solar system will be different from this one, but it will still involve sacrifice and limitation. Okay.
And it also tells about that the motive within is very big revealer what is evil and what is good.
Well, this is the whole thing. Hierarchy judges on the basis of motive. They don't say, oh, you weren't successful, therefore we disapprove. Or like was stupidly said, I like soldiers who never have been captured. A person is a hero, they've been captured, they've endured years of torture and confinement, And then some idiot comes along and says, I like those who haven't been captured. All right.
I
So
have
yeah,
found
go
that
ahead.
Anna Kingsford quote, if you'd like me to read it.
Oh my God. Now, I'll tell you what, just tell us where to find it, because it's a real.
It is a long one. It is footnote number 65 on page 835 of
Cosmic fire.
Cosmic Fire, yes.
Whoa,
And it's from a
whoa.
trance writing.
Exactly, exactly. I tell you what, let's have maybe Michael, next time we meet. That is such a juicy bit of revelation that we couldn't even concentrate upon it right now. But because whoever the source is of this writing says, this is a question that we would have withheld from you for a while, something of that nature. We didn't really want to get into this with you, but since you asked, and here it is. So maybe we do that next time, if you can remind me. And it makes a tremendous comment on the nature of good and evil. And it talks about limitation and the loneliness of God, or that God should be aught other than God. It's very philosophical. So thanks for finding that. Footnote 65, did you say?
That's correct, on page
And page
800, 830, 835.
Okay, good. I know what a can of worms that would be if we try to get into it right now after an hour and 40 minutes of work. But study it then. Go into your Cosmic Fire books and go there and see what you think. And then we'll have a little, that's optimistic, a little discussion on it. So that's good. I'm glad you found it, Michael.
And we have some written comments. First from Anne Veronica. I was thinking about the many definitions that work in many ways as a blind, but giving different words also gives a different geometric shape, energy, or vibration.
Correct.
And that gives many ways to get closer or understand the subject. So each ray can understand in its own way and different keys to be unlocked.
That's it, if you're not blinded. In other words, if you're one of those who has eyes to see and ears to hear, then the different names for the same thing can give a lot of aspects of vision. Otherwise, it just confuses the one who cannot penetrate it. So either way can be used to blind, the same name for different things or different names for the same thing. It can be revelatory for those who can penetrate. It can be a wall for those who are not ready to penetrate. And sometimes DK says even dangerous things. At one point he said, okay, there is some of these things that I'm writing down are symbolic and some are factual. And I'm not going to tell you which is which. That's up to you to find out. So we have to discriminate in that case. And not everybody can do that. I'm having a little trouble. Yeah, now you should see Parabrahm, right, Michael?
Yes.
I think so.
Yes.
Okay, good. So, and Veronica, yes, I believe that is correct. And hopefully each one of us comes to the point of penetration, whereas before we could not. We could not. afraid this little image of myself is stalling because the computer was on all night and it has slowed down. Okay, what else, Michael?
Okay, and Veronica also asked, couldn't evil be the lesser vibration of a higher vibration?
Yes, evil, love, evil, life, live, evil, live, veil, vile. Those are all kind of anagrammatic and combinations and permutations. Put them all together. Evil is limited perception. Evil is ignorance. Evil begins above, but is so reduced that the perception becomes discordant to the divine plan. And discordant perception has to be alleviated. So it's a reflection of, what is the old saying that the devil is God inverted, or something of that nature? It's in Latin, and I don't know that. Demon est Deus inversus, something like that. I mean, I never studied Latin, but that is the idea that there is an inversion of something higher. There is no absolute evil. There is only myopic perception, which is ignorance in ever densifying forms, and thus ever more obstructive forms. You know, it's interesting where our conversation is going, because the world is swept at this moment by evildoers, we would say. Those who, if they get their way, will return us to the days of Rome, when cosmic evil made a tremendous demonstration in the period of the autocratic emperors. Autocracy is rearing its ugly head. Yes, sir?
Just quickly a note that evil and evil beings or entities has to be considered. What does that mean? That these evil, so-called evil entities are those who have outlived the good. So
Yes.
Their time has been, and they didn't choose during the time period that they were expressing this purpose of life. That time, they were stuck, and they started to go, as it is said, it's inverted, five-pointed star. They started to go towards the matter again, which is not the purpose. So that is the principle of evil is something, and then the evil entities is something else.
Well, yes, and also I can relate the principle of evil to what you just said, because somewhere DK says that evil is the good that should have been outlived. Evil is the good of the past, maybe, you know, that should have been outlived. In other words, you hang on to something in your stuckness, and you become an obstructive force to the good which evolution represents. So somewhere we could find that as well. The good outlived, etc. They are related. Evil beings hang on, and the general principle of evil is that it's of the past and is obstructive in the present. Okay, what else, Michael?
Okay, last question that I have at the present is from Anna. Does cosmic evil have to do with the Antichrist or with AI, artificial intelligence?
Well, I think I would look at it in a more general way. Those may be, I can't say that artificial intelligence is evil. We've seen the Matrix movies and those kinds of things where the machines take over, so to speak. But DK tells us that the fifth ray technology will liberate humanity for the cultivation of their spiritual life. So it all depends on how technology is used, and there is a danger, of course. But on the cosmic mental plane, there are instances of cosmic evil. And for sure, their home is on the cosmic astral plane. And their reflected home is on the systemic astral plane in a place called Marakara, the home of Mara, or illusion. And even the word Mar and Mara suggest in English that you are marring something, you are destroying something, and this is what the Buddha confronted from his perspective in relation to the cosmic mental plane. He was able to deal with planetary evil and overcome it, overcome Mara. But his perspective was that of a sixth degree initiate who was the head of the hierarchy at that time. Not the Prince Siddhartha or Gautama that he used, just the way Christ used Jesus. This is my opinion anyway. But the Buddha was the head of the hierarchy, in touch at the sixth initiation with the cosmic mental plane and helping to clear out the evil of the cosmic astral plane. And in general, we sometimes look at a specific instance and we say, well, that's the source of evil. But no, it's just something that can be used for evil purposes or maybe not. Whatever obstructs the purpose, the archetypal purpose, in the mind of the higher arc, who in this case is our planetary logos or Sanat Kumara, whatever obstructs that purpose is to be considered as evil. And that can be a lot of different things. It's in the way of the moving plan which, following purpose, brings the archetype into manifestation. The good is the archetype. The evil is that which obstructs it, and there are just so many things. But they're all illusory, essentially, because they have to do with constrained perception, with a too narrow perception. They have to do with limitation, if I'm just going to look at this in the abstract sense. So it's very tough to say that some specific instance, like artificial intelligence, would be the cause of evil. It's just an instance of that which used incorrectly can bring about great evil, and that which used properly can bring about liberation. Okay. Nothing else, right, Michael?
That's it for now, yes.
Okay. So next time we're going to look, hold on to your horses here, because we're going to look at what came through Dr. Anna Kingsford. You take a look at it yourself, page 835 and footnote 65. I wonder how you found that, Michael.
It's using the CD-ROM in its most profound way.
Okay, well, we need some lessons there. I'm afraid I threw away the instructions and just blundered on through. So that's good to know that one can do that. All right, friends, then we've been together about 2 hours. And I'm just going to, in terms of alignment It's always good, part of the will to good, to say the great invocation together. So I trust that you see it now.
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you. And I have my handy pitch pipe ready to bring out the blue note G when we say the ohms. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Thank you, friends, for attending tonight at 5 o'clock p.m. GMT. Tuya and I will be working with the Glamour book and the Glamour meditation, and I'm sure we'll have no trouble coming up with a glamour related to what is transpiring on the planet at the moment. So if you want to join us, let's see, Michael, where can they find the link?
The link has been sent out on a number of venues through Constant Contact. I sent a message earlier this week giving a link for all the events occurring this week, and BL has sent out a link for the Glamour webinar itself. So,
okay.
And if anyone has any questions on it, they can write to me, lightbearer137@gmail.com, and I can send the link to them to register for that.
One word, lightbearer, and then 137.
Correct.
At gmail.com. That'll be Michael's address in case you don't have the link for the Glamour, which is done on GoToWebinar thus far.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you, friends.
Michael,
and yes, dear?
Michael Stacy and Michael Robbins, my Michael, can you stay after the meeting because I have questions about Zoom?
Sure.
Okay.
Can do. Okay.
Okay, well then we'll dismiss everybody. Is there a way to do that without, I tell you what, I have to stop the recording at least. So I'll do that, and then everybody is free to depart, and we'll the three of us, Tuya and Michael, Stacy, and myself, will just have a little necessary technical meeting. Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye, friends.